I hope we're all surviving our last fun food coma from the conference. I hope we survive this talk too. Yeah. I hope we survive. I don't know. Oh, welcome. Thank you. Hello. I'm really happy to be part of this conference. Thank you to the organizers. I'm going to talk about the interaction of artisanal longline fisheries with protected megafauna in the Galapagos Islands. And this is a study done by the Charles Darwin Foundation. So just to start with, the Galapagos is about 1,000 kilometers west from mainland Ecuador. It has about 4 currents that hits it from different directions, bringing warm and cold waters, which makes it's divided in 3 major bioregions: the far north, the west, and the rest. That is kind of a mixing zone. It was declared marine reserve in 1998. It has 15 major islands, 4 towns, about 25,000 people. In 2016, it had over 220,000 visitors, but I think this number has increased in the last few years. 20% of the marine species are endemic, and is known to have the largest biomass and the largest shark biomass in the world. It's a multiple-use reserve, so that means that 99% of its surface is open for artisanal fishery. There are a few different types of artisanal fishery, but the important thing is that sharks and other megafauna are protected. And for this talk, when I talk about megafauna, I'm referring to sharks, rays, marine mammals, marine turtles, and seabirds. That's it. So I know there are other big things, but I'm referring to these ones only. Commercial fishery was banned when the reserve was declared in 1998. So now to understand how we got to get artisanal longline fisheries in the Galapagos, we have to go back into the 90s. So in the 90s, I started this very strong fishery on those 3 species, the sea cucumber, the Galapagos grouper, and Spanish lobsters. And although most of this fishery was within the marine reserve, as in after the marine reserve was declared, there was little management, and so this led to overfishing. So to shift the pressure from this coastal demersal species into pelagic species, the experimental longline projects started targeting pelagic species like yellowfin tuna and swordfish. 4 pilot projects have happened since the 90s, and the common trend is always really high numbers of bycatch of megafauna, particularly sharks. The first one was in 1997, and it had over 50% of bycatch, mostly sharks. So longline fishery was banned in 2000. There were 2 more projects after that, both of them really high numbers of bycatch, mostly sharks, so it was banned again in the year 2005. Year after, there were negotiations, and there was another in 2012, and this is the data set I'm using for this study. So now, after 4 pilot projects and 2 banning events, there is now another project that happened in 2017 and is still happening right now, of longlining. So important to highlight that the data set belongs to the park. The experiments were also done and designed by the Galapagos National Park, so this is not a scientific study, and we only got access to the data a couple of years ago. The regulations were done by the authorities, meaning the National Park and the National Institute of Fisheries. These are some of the regulations, like for example, some important ones. They would use only 100 hooks. They will be all corrodable hooks. There will be a fisheries observer in every trip. And there was an arbitrary definition that if the bycatch was over 10% of the total catch, then this project would be stopped and the longline fisheries would be banned again. And if anyone is wondering why 10%, I have no idea, because there was no background, scientific or any background to support this 10%. We all wonder where it got from, but that was the regulation. So the aims of these projects were to describe the catch and the target composition and to identify variables that might have an influence in the numbers of bycatch, and then give management suggestions based on this. So the question we really had was, is there any way to reduce bycatch of protected species of megafauna using longline fisheries in the Galapagos Marine Reserve? Some of the results, from 12 vessels with permits, we only had 4 that were consistent. They did set up more than 200 hooks with a total of 115 sets. They caught almost 4,900 animals with 33 species. Now, this is a fun part, because when we tried to define and describe what was bycatch and what was target, we realized that there had been a lot of discussion. This term was very vague before, during, and after the project. So if we take into account that the historically targeted species of these projects were yellowfin tuna and swordfish, and everything else was supposed to be considered bycatch because it was not targeted at the moment, then 25% of the total catch was bycatch. That means that it was beyond the 10% limit agreed by everybody. There was a third species, though, the scholar, that had higher numbers than the swordfish. And if we put together these three species, then 12% of the total catch is bycatch, which is again beyond the limits. So with these numbers, this project should have stopped and the longlining should have been again banned. But it was eventually decided that all the protected species, meaning sharks, mantas, sea turtles, sea mammals, and seabirds, only those species were going to be bycatch, considered bycatch, and everything else was going to be commercialized and sold. And with this, the bycatch was reduced to 9%, and then this project continued, and this is one of the reasons why we have another project happening right now. So with the latest numbers in mind, we then have that most of the catch, the targeted species were yellowfin tuna, followed by the scholar and the swordfish, but there were another 11 species of bunnyfish that were commercialized. 9% of the bycatch was mostly black tips, mantas, and unidentified sharks. But we also have Galapagos, hammerheads, threshers, and another 13 species, many of them protected internationally, and 9 species of sharks. So mapping up very broadly the target and bycatch in the lower map, we can see that we can find bycatch everywhere in all 3 bioregions. So we did an analysis comparing or using all these variables to account for seasonality and bioregion, bait, and a few other things. And for details about this, there's a paper coming out next month, so details of all the methods would be in the paper. But the point is that we were not able to identify any of these variables that would have an effect on the numbers of bycatch. So there are a couple of reasons why we might have had this result with our models. One of them, I think, is absolutely linked with the spot that we're talking about. So this is the Galapagos that is packed with megafauna. This is one of the reasons why this place is so famous. So I would say it's basically unavoidable to catch megafauna using longlining in a spot like the Galapagos. And what this is so important is that the Galapagos rely on tourism. So this is the last few decades. A few decades before it was fisheries or other things, but the last few decades is totally tourism, and about 60% of this tourism is marine-based. We get a lot more jobs and a lot more cash coming from fisheries. In the particular case of sharks, because these are always the main bycatch, when we compare the value of a fish shark in Ecuador and the value of a live shark everywhere else in the world, but particularly in the Galapagos, we see a massive difference. And we just very broadly calculate if this value is multiplied by all the sharks fished by all the fleet in consecutive years, the economic loss of the Galapagos would be massive. So we concluded that within the context of the Galapagos Islands, it's not suitable to use longlining because it's bycatch and protected species, and these species are sustaining the marine-based activities, which is a very important activity in the Galapagos. So we suggested to the park that longlining should not continue. But knowing the market value of yellowfin tuna and swordfish, and knowing that tourists are willing to pay almost double for a fish or a product that is sustainably fished, we did another analysis to produce an alternative. So we did this cluster analysis of the target species to understand on the same data set, to understand where they hang out together. And we suggested to the park that they could still fish these targeted species, but with a different fishing method, a fishing method that would reduce the risk of bycatch. So another reason why we might have this result with the model is more related to management and data taking, and this is another important thing that was highlighted by this project. There were quite a few violations of the rules. These are some of them, like for example, 20% of sharks were unidentified. Only 4 out of 12 vessels were consistent. There were errors in the spatial data, and what this means is that we worked with a small data set that had gaps, and this definitely limits the analysis. But I think what this really highlights is that even after a few decades of this place being a marine protected area, a marine park, it still has issues or challenges with communication, compliance, enforcement, and a lack of monitoring, of commitment to monitoring and data taking. So then we concluded that within the context of the Galapagos Islands, there is no way to avoid bycatch of these protected species. So these species are iconic, so therefore this fishery is not suitable for a spot like the Galapagos Islands. We then suggested that longlining should not happen, but the species could be fished in these hotspots with different fishing methods. We also made a focus, that management needs to focus a bit more on enforcement, compliance, monitoring, so that we can ensure the sustainability of both the ecosystems and the economy of the Galapagos Islands. So thank you always to the donors and all the collaborators, and thank you so much to Emilio and all the team for this amazing conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Florencia. Any question? I do have a question for you. All the bycaught animals are actually dead, or do you think there is some survival rates? Or do you have any estimation of this? I don't know.
So some of them, we know they were alive, but we know that out of anecdotal information because they did not take any data on this. It was one of the things that was required to note if the mortality and which ones were alive and which ones were one of the gaps that we did not have. So also with this, we could not assess mortality after capture.
Thank you. Any other question?
Thank you for your talk. Fishing methods that would be more sustainable. What suggested methods, are there suggested alternatives that have been trialed already, or what alternative fishing methods do you think would be feasible in that area for the fishermen?
Yeah, thanks. What we suggested was the line and fish, or it's called trolling maybe. Well, the line and hook, which is a method that is being used. It does have bycatch, but it's a lot easier to handle rather than a long line that stays there for many hours. So the one thing that we're suggesting is using line and hook. And also because this one has been proven to be useful for tuna and swordfish in these spots. So it's a different method. It's probably more costly because you need one person to be with one line, but it definitely it's easier to handle bycatch with that one. So that's the one that we're suggesting strongly.
Any other question? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the next talk, Massimiliano Bottaro, reducing bycatch, breaking news, reducing bycatch mortality in the Med, the project proposal eLife, Erasmo Branc low impact fishing experience.
So, I start. Good afternoon to everybody. I am very happy to be here after some years of absence. And I'm glad to present not the result of ongoing project, but a new project recently funded by the LIFE program of the European Commission, the LIFE project. But what is the LIFE program? The LIFE program is the financial instrument of the European Union to protect the continental environment and to contrast the climate change. It was created 27 years ago. At the moment, it has a total amount of budget of over 3 billion euros. The average success rate of this program is more or less at 20%. In the last 27 years, the LIFE program funded many projects devoted to, for example, biodiversity conservation or reduction of pollution in order to protect the European environment, but just one for the Erasmo Branc conservation, and in particular in the framework of artisanal fisheries. And some years ago, in this context, we started to think about a new idea of a project regarding the conservation of Erasmo Branc in the framework of the professional fisheries. And so in 2016 and 2017, we tried to present our proposals, our ideas to LIFE program, but we obtained just rejections. But the good time finally came last year, and so we have this project that have a fundamental aim to promote best conservation action and innovative management measure to conserve, to reduce the impact of the professional fisheries to the elasmobranchs in the European seas, and in particular in the Mediterranean seas, with two specific goals: to reduce the bycatch of threatened species and to reduce the mortality caused by accidental catches of these animals. Some technical details about this project. The LIFE project is a 5 years project. The total amount of the budget is over 3 million euros, with a co-funding by the European Commission of 60%. The partnership 10 partners, and it is a very interesting and balanced partnership because it is constituted by three national public research institutes: the Sessione Zoologica Anton Dohrn, project leader, my institute, the University of Padova, and the Italian National Research Council, one private research institute, MER from Cyprus, two stakeholders, Lega Ambiente, an NGO devoted to environmental protection, and the CMED, a professional fishermen association, two marine protected areas from Pelagic Island and Tavorara Island in Sardinia, and two private companies, Costa Entertainment, a leader in aquarium and marine exhibit, and Softeco, leader in developing of software for environmental monitoring. We are also the endorsing of many public institutions, and where we will work. The project will be carried out in the Central Mediterranean Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean Sea, in particular in the Adriatic Sea, Tyrrhenian, Strait of Sicily, Ionian Sea, Aegean Sea, and Levantine Sea. And the target are the elasmobranch listed as endangered or critically endangered in the European Red List of Marine Fishes, as requested by the LIFE program. For example, the sandbar shark, Carcharinus plumbro, the deep water shark, Dalatia selica, but also flag species like the basking shark, but it could include also species that not listed in the European Red List as endangered species, but for example, the mako shark that is data deficient, but it is a species that is listed critical endangered in the Mediterranean Red List of the IUCN. This is also another additional target species. So the LIFE program, LIFE project has several actions, but we want to point attention with the conservation action. This is the action to obtain to get the goal of our project. And in few words, we will use innovative and low-impact fishing gears, both in professional than in demersal fishing activities, in order to reduce the bycatch. For example, using the grid to avoid elasmoran bycatch during trawls, or the sea hooks in the pelagic to reduce the bycatch in the pelagic long-line fisheries. We will train fishermen, professional fishermen, to best practice to manipulate elasmobranch accidental coat in order to leave them alive in the sea, And we will use also artificial barriers to avoid, to limit the illegal fisheries in the marine protected areas of pelagic island, where there is a seasonal population of sandbar shark. And we will use also, we will create also a sighting network in the North Sardinia to alert the presence of the basking shark in order to reduce the dangerous interaction between humans and these species, and create new office for the fishermen in order to help them to fundraising to convert their original fishing gears to innovative and low impact fishing gears. I'm going to finish. All the sea action, the conservation action, will be monitored during the project. The monitoring, for example, will be carried out by different tools. For example, the tagging will be used to verify the efficiency of our best practice in order to reduce the mortality. We will tag the shark before the leaving in order to understand if they will we will live or not after the catch. On board people to monitor the reduction of bycatch, and of course scuba divers in the case of the pelagic island for monitoring the reduction of illegal fishing and the status of the seasonal population of the sandbar shark. This is the main expected impacts, and I think that you can read easily, and I will stop because Carlotta looked me very bad. And so, thank you very much for your attention, for staying alive, and staying also, stay tuned.
Thank you very much, Massimiliano. Unfortunately, no questions for the moment.
So, no, we don't have time for questions because this has been a different presentation. I mean, it was more breaking news. And so I'm calling the next speaker, Aletta Bester, and she's going to talk about shark and ray forensics, a conservation tool for the Western Indian Ocean region. Thank